The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here. Welcome to this week's episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. Today, we're going to talk about hardware sales, which is an area that many in the channel say is no longer important for MSPs. And I think this is an area that we need to talk a little bit more about changing that mindset. Hardware sales can get you in the door, and it can also work to help to retain clients. Now, my guest today is Brian Laufer. He's the Vice President of QuoteWerks. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in Brian right now. And there we have Brian. How you doing today, Brian?
Great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I love your background. That's probably, you're the window out your office there down in Orlando, isn't it?
I wish. Yeah. So basically every year we change the backdrop, the login screen for QuoteWerks. And so this year we got this nice beach scene that we've nicknamed Jurassic Park.
Nice. Yeah. I like it. And definitely we are in different climates, being up here in Michigan, it's usually like, 75 degrees, I know you're jealous right now, but in the wintertime, that just flips right around. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about hardware sales today. And, I think back to, a lot of discussions about hardware sales, and it has changed so much in the channel. Everybody's like, oh, I don't want to sell hardware because it's low margin. And, there's a missed opportunity there because ultimately hardware sales drives services sales. And, that's where our high margin dollars are. And, it's a critical aspect, and we have to replace clients' workstations. We've got to replace, various hardware and technology in their environment, and it's critical, right?
Exactly. I mean, and the thing is that, we've been talking about like the customer acquisition side of things. That is, that's an area that a lot of people don't think about, because a lot of times where MSPs get their leads from are from people trying to buy a system or replace their infrastructure. And so if you're not selling any of that, then you're not going to get the services side of that sale.
Right. And, I've often viewed hardware sales as the money tree. I think often, we're all looking, okay, we need to acquire more clients. We need more clients. But we have existing clients that we can drive more business from by, keeping their hardware fresh. And,
exactly.
So it's critical from that perspective.
Yeah. And the thing that I've seen when talking to other MSPs is like, some of them are like, I don't care what kind of hardware they have, whatever. But I'm like, why aren't you the one that's in charge of procuring it? Or at least saying, hey, these are the 3 laptops or 3 workstations that we support, as opposed to them just going off to random places like Staples or someplace like that and just buying the cheapest workstation possible,
Yeah, of course. And then in those cases, you're dealing with situations where, they're consumer level products, number one. Yep. Number two, they may not have the professional version of the operating system. So then you're dealing with that. And, I've always been a firm believer that, when you buy it from the MSP, then you have control over that process. And, and you can provide a much better customer experience if there are issues, because if they buy it from elsewhere, and there's problems, then you're having to, run down a different path, and it becomes more of a headache overall. And exactly. Speaking of distributors, how many distributors would you say that an MSP should work with?
That's an interesting question, which actually is, I was going to talk about a little bit later, but I might as well talk about now. So to answer your question, when talking to most people, they're using like 1 or 2 is like the first half. The other half are using 4 to 6.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. So, and the reason I'm able to say this is because what we do every year, something that we started back in the COVID days, was we started doing an IT procurement report where we actually sent a survey out to not just QuoteWerks customers, but also anybody in the IT community. And so it started off small. Our first report had like 100 responses. This year's response had close to 1,000. So
Oh, wow.
it gives us a good broad range. About half of those are QuoteWerks customers, half of them are not. And in that breakdown has actually been very consistent every single year, where half the people use just like one or two, and then everybody else uses up to like six. So it just depends on
Wow.
what makes sense for them.
I mean, having that many distributors, probably the wrong person to use this expression, but I would pull my hair out. Um, you know, pull my hair out trying to figure out who's got availability, who has the best price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
Right. But that's where a good CPQ tool as well as a good procurement tool come into play. Because
Right.
basically on one screen, you can see all of the pricing availability for everyone you work with. And that's not just with QuoteWerks. I mean, pretty much at the baseline, we all do that. So if you're
Sure.
not using a CPQ tool and you're purchasing
Yeah.
hardware, you should.
Right. I mean, because the time it takes to do that, when we talk about margin, we talk about those that say, well, there's no margin in product. Well, where you can increase the margin and try to squeeze as much as you can out of it is to be efficient in your quoting process, right? And also just the whole procurement process, because all that takes time.
Right. Well, and the thing too is like a lot of times people are thinking about just through distribution. So like a TD Synnex or an Ingram Micro. But if you're not doing a whole lot of hardware sales, you're not going to see a lot of margin on that, right? So
Right.
that's why we also have an integration with like Amazon Business and CDW as well. So that way you can not just see distribution, but also those vendors as well. And you can see the pricing for Amazon Business as well. So you can kind of see that breakdown, just so you can see what the customer would see, and then also what your pricing is as well.
Okay. Yeah, and that like we were talking about COVID, so much has come from COVID, and the whole supply chain issues. Although that we're 4 years beyond COVID, those supply chain issues haven't necessarily gone away.
Right.
It used to be more so that there was an abundance of hardware out there that you could source from various distributors, but now it's, some might have it, some might not. Sometimes nobody has it. So then you have to go down the path of looking at other hardware, and it just becomes extremely time consuming. And especially, for smaller MSPs that may not have a dedicated person to, manage that process. Then it falls on the role of maybe the owner of the business or the office manager. And there are only so many hours in a day. So trying to be as efficient as possible is just critical. One thing I wanted to ask you about more is, let's talk a little bit about hardware sales and how that leads to more business for an MSP.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so I alluded to it earlier. First is just getting customers, that acquisition of that customer, which is the most expensive part of the entire process.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like I was saying, they may know what an MSP is, but they're more looking for replacing infrastructure or something along those lines, and that's what gets you in the door. The other side has to do with the retention of those customers. So if you're telling them, hey, go elsewhere to find XYZ product, you're potentially losing them to another MSP, because that other MSP is going to be selling them products.
Right.
Yeah. But also the fact that, not only are you selling them product, but you're then going to be able to bundle in additional services, whether that be managed services, cloud services, or whatever that might be. But that is where you are going to be able to generate more revenue, because we're not making most of our money, like you said, off the hardware. We're getting it off the services.
Right.
And then on the flip side, the other thing you can do too, which, you can take it how you will. A lot of times people will just do a bottom number, not necessarily talking about what the services are. And they'll just say, hey, this is going to cost you X amount. And so you can bundle, you can build in additional revenue on the hardware sales that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do if you were selling one-off items.
Yeah. And, let's talk a little bit about the, like options as far as, there's a plethora of workstations that you can pick from. I think many MSPs will choose, one particular vendor, whether it be, Dell, HP, Lenovo, et cetera. But if we look specifically at the line of products within a particular vendor, sometimes you just might want to give a couple options, right? So here's kind of a low, mid, high performance type machine, and depending on the role of that particular person or that end user, they might need a beefier machine. So, to give options like that is critical too.
Exactly. And so like that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on with our quote valet piece is that, when we're sending that quote out to the customer, they can actually change quantities as well as select different options as well. So, they can do that good, better, best option on that quote.
Do you see a lot of, like upselling opportunities for MSPs?
Oh yeah, definitely. Not just on the fact that, the good, better, best options, but the fact that, because I'm selling this item, maybe I want to sell this item as well. And that's something that we see a lot of, because we have that integration with Eatalize and able to see, the different pricing availability across the board from all the vendors that we work with. So it makes it very easy to add on additional revenue for those hardware items as well as the services as well.
And, where do you see MSPs from a perspective of, having specific models that, okay, these are our standards versus, every time they're, starting with a blank page and trying to figure out, right? I mean, because that can take a lot of time.
Exactly. I mean, and that's why I usually recommend having, 3 to 5 systems, usually the same brand, like you're saying, that you recommend when quoting and just have those favorites available to you. Because the thing is like, you're going to run into problems with a system. You sell 100 systems, probably 10 of them are going to have issues. So you have to figure out where those issues are going to be and how you're going to handle them. So if you're dealing with one vendor and one type of product line, you'll know how to handle that as opposed to people that are bringing their own devices in.
Okay. Gotcha. And so within QuoteWerks, if I want to drill a little bit deeper from that perspective, you have that ability where you can quote those additional options and they can pick and choose, like you said, right? So I know you mentioned that they can, adjust the quantity, but they could, you could add app options in and then they could remove those too, correct?
Exactly. And, from a quoting perspective, we actually have favorites that, that are on at a company level as well as a sales rep level as well, so that they can always make sure that they're quoting those same particular items every single time. So they don't have to figure out, oh, what configuration do I need to look for? And that way they can easily see that as well.
Gotcha. So what about non-traditional, distribution companies? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite story when it comes to that has to do with a lead back at IT Nation. I mean, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago at this point. But it basically, we had just came out with an Amazon business integration, and there was this lead that was just taking a look at us. He's like, "That's amazing," and he's like, but he's like, "I don't know if I can justify the price." So what he ends up doing is he installs the demo, and he goes ahead and puts in his credentials and everything, and he sends a quote to a customer and closes it right there at the show. The amazing thing is he ended up sourcing everything from Amazon Business, and because of the cost savings, he ended up saving enough money to actually justify the cost of QuoteWerks in that one sale.
Wow.
And he would have never thought to use Amazon Business. And I use Amazon Business because a lot of MSPs aren't doing a lot of hardware sales, especially the smaller ones. And so if you're not doing a whole lot of hardware sales, you're not going to get the discounts through distribution. Whereas
Right.
you might through, working with Amazon Business or somebody else. But that being said, one of the benefits of using a system like QuoteWerks or any other CPQ system is you're seeing your pricing and availability on one screen. But that doesn't mean that has to be the pricing and the pricing that you're going to get either. What that can do is give you the ability to negotiate with your other vendors and distributors as well. So that way, to pick up the phone or send an email or send off that RFQ to that other distributor as well.
Gotcha. So one thing that is from an efficiency perspective, obviously quoting is part of QuoteWerks, right? It's the first word in QuoteWerks.
Exactly.
But procurement, so taking that next step, because you quote, then you need to procure, that can be done all within the same platform. So let's talk about those efficiencies and what are all the benefits of doing that? I mean, I know some of them sound obvious, but sometimes we need to hear it out loud.
Yeah. So typically with an MSP of a certain size, so we'll just say like where you have multiple people, there's usually that one person that handles procurement for you, and it's wizardry. You have no idea how it's done. It's just done, and you're just like, okay, whatever. They're probably using like an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. But the problem is you don't have visualization across the whole company to see what's actually happening. So with QuoteWerks, for our procurement, you can see every single item from every single order that hasn't been ordered yet on one screen.
Okay.
The reason that that's important is because, again, talking about volume and whatnot, you want to make sure you can combine orders to get that free shipping minimum, right?
Right.
The other thing that happens too is the fact that you may have quoted a system 20 days ago. So Ingram Micro may have had that system 20 days ago, but they don't now. So what are you going to do? So we can, on an item by item basis, actually see what the pricing and availability is again from each of the distributors, and then change on the fly which vendor we're purchasing from. And then from there, place that combined order for, we'll just say with Ingram Micro, for instance, that maybe was originally with TD SYNNEX. And the key there too is the fact that we're combining orders. So maybe we're combining 7 or 8 different quotes that became orders as opposed to just doing one-offs as well.
Right.
And that's something that not all systems are able to do. And then because we're ordering all these different types of parts, the distributor is going to split that into multiple orders. Just because you have a single order you're sending them doesn't mean that it's going to come back as a single invoice. And then we're able to keep track of that whole hierarchy of ordering that happens. And we're placing online orders with Ingram Micro, TD SYNNEX, D&H, Amazon Business, even Dell Premier as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said the word magic. That truly is magic, because I mean, that without that type of tool, it is a very cumbersome, in that saying it lightly.
Yeah.
Because this is a PG show. But that's saying it very lightly, because of the fact that it is a huge time absorbing process. And especially the fact that not every client is ready to pull the trigger. You might quote something out, and you're working with your primary contact, and maybe they need to get final approval from senior management, and sometimes it becomes a lengthy process. And unfortunately, availability and pricing, that all changes. I mean, it can change day to day, right? So
or hour to hour, depending on where you're going.
Yeah, definitely. So, for our audience that's not familiar with QuoteWerks and wants to learn more, of course, they can check out your website. They can go to everythingmsp.com, search for QuoteWerks. We have a lot of great information available there. Can we talk a little bit about any special promos that you might have, for our audience members?
Yeah, so actually through Everything MSP on our listing there, we are offering a free implementation, what we call an accelerated implementation. It's basically with that, you work one-on-one with one of our senior techs, and we get you all set up with QuoteWerks, and that's a $300 value. And then for any existing customers, for any of our subscriptions, we're able to offer extended trials of them as well. So that way they can try out, make sure that they're going to see that return on that investment.
Okay. So you can check that out directly at QuoteWerks website. You can check it out at everythingmsp.com. As we wrap things up here, are there any parting words that you would like to share to our audience?
Yeah, so we just released the procurement report that I was talking about on August 1st. Also, there's some really cool things coming out on the QuoteWerks side. One of them being an integration to Halo PSA. That is one that people have been asking for a long time. We have integrations with ConnectWise, Kaseya, as well as Autotask, but Halo is the one that we're hearing a lot of these days. So we're happy to be able to release that. And then we're also releasing a multi-signing component to QuoteValet, basically allowing for co-signing of agreements. So that way your customer can sign as well as yourself, or if you've got multiple parties involved, all 3, 5, 10, 20 of you can sign at the same time as well.
Let's hope it's not that many, but right? Yeah. That's awesome. And, just, recap, hardware sales is an incredible opportunity to be able to drive those lucrative service sales. And most importantly, you're staying on top of keeping your clients' workstations fresh. I did a blog post about this several years ago, and just talking about how hardware sales truly is the money tree. You have to educate your clients, about that process, that, you put together, a list of what their hardware is, what's the estimated date of replacement, an estimated cost replacement, and work with them. So during, your QBRs, whatever, cadence that you have with those technology business reviews, talk through that process. We can spend a lot of time and energy going out trying to get new business, which we still need to do, but we need to focus on those that already, love us and, that are working with us and, helping them from that perspective. And most importantly, leveraging tools like QuoteWerks to be able to make it as efficient as possible, not only for you, but also for the client. Long gone are those days of, sending them some quote that they have to sign and scan back in and send to you or fax. Thank God those days are gone, right? And, you can just do it all in one platform. So, Brian, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. And everybody that is listening to us today, thank you for being here. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.